This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Mike Sedita.
Welcome to the Good Neighbor Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sedita. Today we're joined, this is one of my favorite topics. Everybody who knows me knows I'm a pet guy. Norman is in my graphics. He's on my cartoon graphics. He's on my picture, my graphics. I love learning about different things that are going on that pertain to our pets and our animals. And we're have the pleasure of being joined by Richard Nilsson. He is at heart an entrepreneur, but his company is My Pet Go. Richard, how you doing today?
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for having me. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm in sunny Spain, and I always enjoy discussing how we can improve the lives of our beloved pets, like your own.
You know, it's funny is the Good Neighbor Podcast is generally we're dealing with a lot of small to medium-sized business owners and talking about their brand. I will tell you, this is a first for me, doing my first international interview, but hopefully you're going to be in the U.S. relatively soon, and we'll get into some of that now. But world traveling, this is the first international Good Neighbor Podcast. So tell us a little bit specifically about what is My Pet Go?
Yeah, so look, I mean the idea for me, I'm actually going to show you my inspiration to it.
Well, let me ask you this before. Oh, very nice, awesome.
That's the little guy. So,
what is his name?
So here's what he got. He's wearing a My Pet Go, which is essentially a wearable, and I think what people might have come across in the pet space is a lot of GPS trackers and different types of wearables. When we started this some 4 years ago, the whole kind of notion was what else can be done with a wearable, and how can we take the data, extrapolate that data, and explain how the pet is feeling physically and emotionally, which is obviously very different from the location or whereabouts of the pet, right? And my sort of selfish approach here was, how can I understand Caesar, my little dog, better, how he's doing physically and emotionally? I know he has anxiety. I know he is a stressed out little guy that if you leave him behind, he'll bark until we come back again, right? But at the same time, he's the most happy chappy little guy who gives, like so many other dogs and cats, I suppose, a lot of love and lots back. So it was kind of for me to give something back where the pet owner can better understand their pet and therefore bond with them better and understand how they can address, certain health issues that are potentially creeping up.
So, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I just did, some research looking at your website and trying to understand some specifics. And you, like I said, you could correct my thought process, but I kind of envision it as, besides the tracking part issue, but more like a Fitbit for my pet to kind of track their health and their wellness and is that a fair correlation, or am I completely out of whack with that?
No, you're I think spot on. I think, this is a Whoop strap, a Boston-based American company, which is, fantastic. And I think that's another inspiration to what we're doing. They are mainly tracking your sleep and strain and certain health markers that will help to indicate whether you should exercise today, whether you should rest more, whether you are rested, whether you are sleep deficient, or whether so it's very sort of big on sleep. And we looked at it and said, look, what are the things that we could try to explain in terms of our pet? And that for us is four vitals. It's temperature. So we look at ambient and body temperature, right? Which could help with stuff like, hyperthermia or heat stroke or, other things that could be sort of happening, right? But there is a lot of other important factors when you look at a temperature, right? That correlates with other data points, and therefore you can then kind of draw conclusions with that. We look at pulse rate, we look at respiration, and we look at HRV, which is a health marker that we humans understand for ourselves, but not for our pets so much. So we're trying to own that marker. And then we look at all sorts of behavior traits: itching, licking, scratching, resting position, sleeping, step count, which is obviously very a la Fitbit. But the whole idea is to kind of paint a picture of your pet's health in the same way that we as data-driven individuals can look at use an Aura Ring or a Whoop strap or an Apple Watch or whatever it may be, and that kind of gets translated into our smartphone to an interface, and you look at it. But because they don't tend to talk,
right?
We just don't know. So how do we figure it out? And it's kind of data, and then all that goes into AI models, and it's a lot of trial and error. And we work with some of the leading cardiologists in sort of on the veterinary side to kind of ensure that we are very close to the ground truth. But yes, what you just said is pretty spot on. We aspire to be 100% correct. We're maybe at 85%, depending on which health marker you're looking at, and we're looking at adding more things, right? So as you start to get these right, you can then start to kind of put 2 and 2 together, and that then concludes that certain things certain other health risks are there, and other things are creeping up.
Well, so like I've owned English Bulldogs for 20 years. So they're like the model. Forget the step part of it. I'd probably have 4 steps a day, like going to the food bowl and to the bed. But the rest of it, all the different things you're talking about is definitely something that, again, you can't read your dog's mind. You pick up on markers and the way they react and some of the things that are going on. So with this, and thinking of that in mind, you had mentioned, vet cardiologists. Do you have, like, I'm assuming, you're a VC guy, right? I mean, that's kind of your, like, is that you go in and look at this area and say, look, I want to develop that area. Do you bring in a team of vets that kind of dissect the data to make sure it's picking up the right tracks?
Yeah. So we have, our sort of chief veterinary officer, or CVO, as we call her. She comes from, she's both a doctor in veterinary medicine, but she's also a biologist, which I think is helpful.
Correlates. Yeah, for sure.
And she's quite the brainiac, and so she has tentacles to a lot of other peers that she obviously talks to and tries to get everything correct with. But we're using her mainly, and then she goes out to the veterinary board that we're using, which are other people that look at the same thing. And what they do is, what she does to start with is she's testing the monitor on an array of healthy, unhealthy dogs. We're a canine only at the moment offering, and different breeds, different ages, different genders, but also different health conditions. And then we're comparing that to veterinary medical equipment that are FDA approved or otherwise regulated, and then also to the stethoscope, which is obviously the old-fashioned analog way of doing it, but it tends to be the most accurate. So it's kind of benchmarking our product, the wearable, the data for the same timestamp, for the same marker, versus the medical equipment versus the stethoscope, and then kind of going backwards to where is the truth there, and how can we calibrate so that we get closer to the truth. And that's where we are at that 85%. But the way we function is that we don't have to be 100% accurate, because we look at the rate of change. So as we see fluctuations, we can be 100% accurate in terms of fluctuations of data. And so when we spot these health markers going either beyond or below what's a healthy marker, that's when we notify you with a push notification, and we say, hey, look, HRV is elevated, and don't panic, because it could be your dog is running towards you because you just came through the door,
right,
and he's been missing you, and therefore heart rate is elevated. So that's all fine. But if that marker is then elevated for, say, a 30-minute period, we then send you a second notification telling you that we're giving you some suggestions of what you can do and why this marker is now possibly elevated for a longer period of time. So it's a bit like having a veterinary friend in the pocket that educates you. Yeah, that's on your phone, and it helps to educate you. It helps to get you to understand your individual pet, because they are very different from one to another, right? They're broadly speaking, there is a lot of similarities, but then again, they're individual, right? Some are very anxious. I got a toy breed, super anxious. You said you've had a lot of bulldogs, so obviously a lot of respiratory issues, breathing and other things, coughing sounds and things that you can pick up on. It's very much a, we want to be as close to the ground truth as we can. We use BCG as the underlying science. So everything is science. It's technology married with medicine, married with science.
Yeah. So a couple quick questions off of that, like from a logistics standpoint. How long has this been in development? Like, where are we? Are we 18 months in? Are we, 36 months in? Like, when was the brainchild happen to where we're at now?
Yeah, right. Good question. So we're about 4 years in, give or take. And I think 6 months from now we're probably very close to 95% accuracy. This is for this is what we call our generation 1.
Right.
So it's not the prettiest monitor. We know it has a temperature gauge on the back, and all the others kind of sensor tech sits inside of it. So everything is non-intrusive. Nothing goes into the body, or it doesn't harm the pet. There is no electroshocks. There's nothing of that nature. But
well, that's kind of what it looks like. It kind of looked like I had a dog that I had a not shock, but like a vibration. It kind of looks like that, but it's more of a monitor than a corrective thing.
Yeah, that's correct. So we don't do any of that, right? And there are great products for that if that's what you're looking for. We do, however, feel that it's a little bit cruel. I think there are other better ways to
I agree,
to make your dog more obedient, right? And so look, we to get to it, improved generation 2, which will come out in probably early part of 26. So that's Q1 2026. We're currently working on that, but you need to have a Gen 1 to get to a Gen 2.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the initial Garmin in your car was like the size of a small television set. I mean, so and if I understand from doing my research, the goal is essentially, this is kind of like a continuity program. You buy the product, you download the app is on your phone, and you pay your subscription annually, and then it just kind of runs, and it's keeping you in tune with what's going on with your pet.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a, buy a monitor. I mean, we do work with quite a lot of insurance companies, pet insurance. So it's like you get an insurance plan, you get a monitor together, and that's kind of the ultimate package. But usually we sell it to them. They run it on our tech. So we're the tech enabler. We have a program in our application that we call MyPetGo Longevity. And it's a kind of, we give you daily tasks of what you should do as a pet owner or pet caretaker. And if you do these in a timely way, then you will by default have a healthier pet. And it's like, it's hard for us to understand, first of all, we're not vets. We're not educated on what to feed them, how much to feed them. I think in the US, if we look at that market, 55% of the dogs are obese, right? Where humans are at 43%. So the dogs are more obese than the humans, which is a big problem because it leads to a lot of other issues down the road. So I think, what we're doing with the longevity program is we have 3 pillars. We have, first and foremost, what you would call exercise, when we call that sort of activity, right? And it's about the right amount of step count and walking and moving, but also the right amount of resting, right? You have an aging pet, that pet needs to rest, like us humans. Rest is super important to look at longevity. The second one is nutrition, and the second part to that is hygiene, right? You cut the nails, you clean the ears, you clean the tear channels, you groom the dog, like you look after them. And it's like something that goes for a month without proper hygiene is something that at some point is going to have certain issues, right? Especially as they age. So it's really simple stuff. And the third one is health screenings and essentially engaging with our next step recommendations. As we spot abnormalities, we give you a next step recommendation. Could be to talk to a televet, it could be to speed dial your own vet, and we then share all that data so the person that sits on the other end can understand what's going on with your pet. So we don't force you to buy a product or do something you don't want to do. You have, it's completely up to you, but we're giving you the insights that you can act upon so that, your pet can get another 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 more years on planet Earth, right?
Well, it is the predictive nature of the product. I mean, look, your target audience, there's 2 types of pet owners in my experience. There's the people that buy a pet because they want an animal in the house and it's something to have there as like a accessory. And then there's neurotic people like me that have had dogs that literally have baby wipes on the counter and wipe his butt when he comes in the house. And he's literally my brand. I mean, Norman is, people know Norman where I am locally here in Tampa as much as they know me. If I go places without him, it's kind of like, where is he? So there's me. So I'm more on the scale closer to your target audience. I mean, and not that everybody can't use it, but the person that's going to invest that extra money, like me, who has the $300 a month health insurance, wants to monitor, because as a bulldog owner, every vet visit is $200 to $300. Like there is no $60 vet visit when you have an English bulldog. It just doesn't happen. So the predictive nature of it, to kind of get to some of that stuff and maybe catch it. My question to you though is, there are certain things like, you know, like you mentioned it a minute ago, the pushed in nose creates that brachialis, that issue with the breathing. We've corrected that with surgery. We've done that. But Norman has allergies, so he does take medication for his allergies. There's no real workaround with, I mean, I've changed his food. He's on all like fresh food and all this other stuff to kind of mitigate that. So I'm assuming some of the stuff you're going to see in like an obese animal that is eating grain processed food, when you start to see some of those things and the monitors going off, the first step is, hey, maybe switch to a more natural, like those are kind of the recommendations as you're seeing the monitoring. Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
Yeah. Look, Mike, great question. So I think we have to be very careful with how we recommend particular products out there, right? And so we wouldn't recommend a product. We would recommend a solution, and then that solution may be, look, you should maybe have a look at your diet. Here are some of the things that we think the diet should include. And again, you know, it's important to understand that if we don't know everything about your pet, as your vet would, then it's very dangerous to give recommendations just out of the blue, right? So I think it's important for us to understand underlying medical conditions. Of course, we have a journal. We would ask you all these questions as you set up the application and as you sort of fire up the monitor and put the monitor on. But if you tell us that you have a Chihuahua when you actually have a Great Dane,
might get a different reading. There might be a slightly different reading.
We are not going to be helpful. We're going to do more harm probably to you than good. So to counterbalance all of these issues, we have put a lot of safety parameters in place. And again, our chief veterinary officer, she's worked for some of the big pet pharmas, including Zoetis, which is the largest globally, but also Pfizer. And then of course before that she was practicing, but she was head of digital diagnostics. And so she comes from this pharma where you have to have a lot of safety red tape in there, right? And so we're trying to be, look, the whole notion of what we're doing is sensor data that you couldn't get otherwise, right? You actually have to have this on in order to get it. Otherwise, you need to be in the vet in person with medical equipment or a stethoscope.
Right.
And then we have the self-assessment, which is something that's coming into the program, which is asking you a bunch of questions. If you truthfully answer these questions, there are takeaways for us to kind of come back to you with. So if we take sensor data with self-assessment, and then the third one is neural image recognition, and now we kind of deep dive into the whole of artificial intelligence here, but it's where you can take a picture of a stool sample. So, and the stool looks pretty bad. You know, as an obedient pet owner, you probably pick up stool twice a day, right? Morning and evening, maybe 3 times. And so stool, for those that don't know what it means, it's essentially poop. And so you snap a picture of it, you upload it into the app. The app will then chug through a database of tons of healthy and unhealthy pictures of poop, and then with machine learning be able to kind of in a quantifiable way tell you whether that poop is healthy or not healthy, and whether it's, you know, all sorts of bacteria or different type of worms in it, or parasites, I should say, if there is any red poison, if there is blood, all these different things. And so and with that, you can do the same thing with fur to look at different kind of what type of skin disease you may have. With the teeth, you know, oral bacteria,
Yeah.
of all kinds, and then also the eyes, where you tend to get a lot of issues as they age. And I think so. If you take neural image recognition, where feasible, with self-assessment, with sensor data, and then having a rigorous profile of the pet to begin with, you can very accurately paint the status quo once pet and their health, and you will be able to do all these sort of recommendations, right? And I think the more we know, the better the recommendations can be. But the whole idea is to be able to, at the right time, recommend an obese pet a special food program, and have a good local partner in the market, let's say in the US, that can deliver a product that we have tested ourselves with our vets on a degree of pet. We can't just take their mumbo jumbo and believe everything they say. So I think our job to be done is to recommend things that we know are, science backed and has been clinically tested. And as a matter of fact, we have partners like this that are being embedded into our ecosystem. So, we're a data company.
Well,
That's
that
what
was
we are.
kind of the question I was going to next. Like, the first question is, I mean, is there currently distribution anywhere, or are we still months away from Gen 1 being readily available?
So anyone can buy it on mypetgo.com, right? And
Okay.
we can ship it, and we can ship it worldwide, right? So we have distribution partners in India, in Colombia, in all sorts of markets. We have a bunch of investors in the US market that have spent 30 years in the pet distribution business, right? So they really know that business. I think for us, the US market is the market for us, and we need to really do it right. So there is a lot of things that will happen towards the end of this year, and 2025 will probably do a really big push into the US market, and I'll spend a lot of time down there. We have, our CBO is in New York. We have quite a few distributed staff members there. We have a US company. We have US investors. As I said, we just brought on another AI investor. So there's going to be a very big push into the US market. But if your question is, will we find it in our neighborhood pet store anytime soon? Honestly speaking, I don't know. I don't know if that's our model. I mean, our model has been B2B to C, where we kind of partner with the most fit, like pet insurance, because we think it's very synergistic. We think pet longevity companies, they might sell the supplements, and it's kind of like, okay, how do we quantify that the supplements we're giving the pet is helping to make them more active? Let's say that they're inactive. I mean, this would certainly tell you whether they are moving more, whether they are doing more things. So it's about finding those good partners and then leveraging the fact that they have a big existing base of pet owners that might have a need and a want for a product like this. And then we usually white label that. So we are in the market in the US, but you don't know it's us.
Right. I mean, there's a couple things from that. I mean, you guys really are a direct response player. I mean, you don't need to be on a shelf of a store or need to be in the veterinarian's office to promote that product. I looked at your website. It's very user friendly. It's very e-commerce. It's, here's what we have. Here's the product. Here's how it ships. And here's how you sign up for the app. It's just getting the eyeballs on it. And the question I was going to ask, where I was going with that, is I would think the pet market in the US is a little bit more robust than maybe maybe not like Spain or England, but like maybe India. I don't think I mean, it may be completely wrong, but even though there's 1 billion people in India, I don't think pets are as valued at the level as they are where there's people crazy like me in the United States. So I would think that would kind of be like the gold standard to get into the US and reach that target audience the right way, because all they got to do, you got to run an ad with a QR code, sign up, and take them right to the website to buy, and it's done. But the question I really had was, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, was the partnerships. You are essentially what PetMeds did for going to your local vet for your medication, or what Chewy does for food and toys. You are that. I mean, you guys are that for the preemptive. That's the same business model. Those are they're not in. I mean, those products are in stores, but they're not there. So it's kind of that same business model, but just on the preventive medical side, as opposed to the food, or as opposed to the medication on the back end. So there is kind of a blueprint, for how to do that. It's just getting to the right people the right way where it resonates. Do you really how for you, did something happen with Caesar that you were like, I like, how does this idea just come up? Like, was there an issue? Like, he was freaking out when you left the house and you didn't know what was going on? Like, how do you come up with this, the genesis of this?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good question. So, yeah, so Caesar would freak out as we leave the house and leave him behind, which we don't do very often. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have help that lives in the house, or at least they used to. Here in Spain, it's a little bit different now. We will have that in due course, but we try not to leave him alone because he's very anxious. He will yap until we come back. I mean, and he would yap until his windpipe almost collapses and he would pass out because he can't get any oxygen, and therefore he can't get any oxygen up to his brain.
Right.
And so it's quite horrific. So he's with me now where I am, and you know, he kind of goes where we go, and thankfully he's a small little guy, so you can put him in a bag and that's okay. And just people that I would meet at random, you know, if they think a product like this will be helpful. But it has morphed as well. It didn't start with the whole sort of layman data, next step recommendation, connecting to a product or a service. That ecosystem kind of was, you know, you start with something and it's like, oh, it would be fantastic, we could do this as well, and then this as well, and then so it kind of, yeah, it evolves. It becomes, it morphs into something bigger. But it was partly him, and it was partly because I'm opportunistic. I saw this opportunity where you have tons of GPS trackers, but very little for health, very little for wellness, nothing for longevity. I think that longevity is going to shape the pet care industry over the coming 10 years. I think it's going to be the big thing. And it's going to be, you know, if you have a pet, you love it, it's part of the family. Of course, you want that pet to live as long as possible and to be, you know, to be part of the family as long as possible. And so you're going to invest more in longevity moving forward. And so from a financial standpoint, I think, you know, there are a lot of people like you and me out there, Mike, that are concerned, that are willing to spend and go over and beyond, and more than you think. And they are in India, they are in Hong Kong, they're in Singapore, they're all over the place, right? And I think the Gen Z and millennials, they identify their pet truly as a fur baby, and they, many of them, not all obviously, but many of them do not want to have human kids. So they are going to spend $1,000-$1,500 a month on their pet.
Right.
Be it luxury spas, be it specialized hotels that have a special bed with a special food menu for the pet, and the list goes on and on.
You know, what's funny is I mean, it's $200 a month for food, $300 a month for health insurance. You know, if I go out of town, when I plan a vacation, I have to plan for the arrangements to have coverage. So my dog never, like, I've never put one of my dogs in a boarding. I mean, as much as there's some beautiful ones here in Tampa, I just don't do that. I have a bulldog. He's kind of an instigator. Like, he's not really an instigator, but bulldogs in general have that instigation. So I don't put him there. So like, I could plan a vacation, but I got to allocate an extra $1,500 of my vacation to have somebody come and stay at my house every night or whatever it is. So that is a big part of people's lives. And I agree 100%. Like, Gen Z, millennials, like these younger generations, truly, like, pets are as vital to them as anything else. Like, I'm more of a Gen X, but I will tell you, I've ended relationships with women because of their reaction to my dog. And I've told women up front, he's my guy. Like, he's not going anywhere. If you don't like shedding, if you don't like a little bit of drool, if you, I can appreciate it as much as I like spending time with you. He's not going anywhere, no matter what's going on. And it has ended some relationships. So there is that component to where people will spend. So the question I have, saying all that, is, do you think you're underpriced? Because I looked at your price point and it seems like it's low.
Yeah, no, look, I think you're right. It is low, but we want as many pets as possible to get a collar, and sometimes, you know, look, we've looked at the Whoop model also. You pay nothing for the wearable. You get it, it's free. but you commit to a longer subscription, and maybe it's slightly higher per month, right? And so we might move into that model with Gen 2. We are looking at it, and I think when Whoop went from $500 down to that model, it changed the dynamics of the company.
Gotcha.
I mean, they truly got out there. So it's like, do you want to be very niche? Do you want to be broader? Do you want to help as many pets and pet owners as you can? And I think for us, it's the latter. We want to help as many as we can. There's also power in the data. The more data we have, the more users we have, the more accurate we can become, and the better we can get at predicting certain things, giving you insights, ensuring that the recommendations are more spot on and are truly helping you and your pet to live a more joyous life together.
Well, you did say it. I mean, you started this whole thing by saying, I'm a data guy, I'm a data company. Data is king for anything and everything. I mean, we see this every single day. Everything you click on your computer creates a data point that creates a profile for Richard and a profile for Mike, where now you only see the things that are similar likes to build you in. So data is truly the king. So I understand getting as many people on the platform as rapidly as possible, so you have ways to fine tune generation 2 and generation 3. Let me take a step to the side here for a second, because we've talked for 32 minutes about this type of stuff. Give me a little bit of like your background and some of the other ventures maybe you've had some success with and grown, to kind of give people an understanding that while you're in this space and it's new because of what happened with your dog, this isn't your first rodeo. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. All right. So I'm born in an entrepreneurial family. My dad has been in the yacht industry his whole life. So everything from building them with his hands, like wooden boats, to having factories down in Sarasota, not far from where you are.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time as a from I guess the age of 4 up until the age of 20 in Fort Lauderdale and in Naples, down in your neck of the woods, and also Sarasota, where we built our Amiga yacht. So I've had that entrepreneurial kind of bloodline, both from my father, who was in yachts and boats and in all sorts of new boats, representing we were representing Bayliner and Limestone and Donsea in the northern part of Europe. So we brought those boats there in the 80s, and that was a beautiful time, until there were the saying that there are 3 things you can't get rid of. It's HIV, it's a Bayliner, and it's a house in the north of Sweden, which I'm not trying to make fun of HIV in any sort of and so those glory days were over there, but so I have that. And I guess, as I helped him out. I helped my mother. She's in the MICE and travel industry and an entrepreneur in her own right. And so I helped them out a lot as a child. And that was what I did after school and what I did on weekends. And so you kind of, for me, it was, probably entrepreneurship. And I guess as a 21-year-old, I moved to Hong Kong. I went to the Swedish School of Entrepreneurship. So I studied it when it was not a topic that anybody wanted to study, right? And then as a 21-year-old, me and 2 buddies, we moved to Hong Kong and started what was Lifestyle Hong Kong, which became Lifestyle Asia later on. And it was, I guess, the first digital magazine for luxury and lifestyle in sort of Southeast Asia, North Asia. Fast forward, I sold that 11 years later to Hubert Burda Media, which is a German tech and media conglomerate, and stayed with them. Then by that point, we had expanded it from Hong Kong to Singapore to Thailand to Malaysia, sold it to them. This is December 2017. And then I stayed with them for a couple of years, sat on the board, helped them with digital transformation. They had tons of glossy print magazines that I had to take online and create the online versions, do a lot of knowledge transfer from myself and my team to their sort of static print team. And then at some point I realized that, we're losing out to Meta and Google and all the big guys because we don't have the type of data that they have. And so I told myself I probably have to leave the publishing industry and go into something else. And I liked the pet space. I had Caesar and an opportunistic entrepreneur. And then that sort of happened that way. And I kind of told myself I have to do something where I can leverage data in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Right? So it was kind of like, I've been hit on the nose by Meta, Google, and all the guys. So we had incredible viewers and readers and some of the richest people, the creme de la creme of Asia. But we could never compete on the data. We knew where they lived, we knew their address, we knew what they were earning, we knew all this stuff. And we could meet them in the physical sense. We could do very sexy, nice events for Cartier or for Rolex or whatever, right? But we just didn't have the reach and the type of data that Google and Facebook and the other guys
They're
had.
two different components. I mean, like there is the luxury and the cachet of that type of medium.
Yeah.
But from the data standpoint, it's just not there. You're right.
Yeah, it's not there. I mean, it was, I guess Instagram was popping up 17, 18, and it wasn't brand safe. So the luxury brands didn't want to go there, right? Because you don't know where your ad would be next to and whatnot. But that kind of changed 19, and everybody was on Instagram all of a sudden. Everybody took their budgets away from a lot of other credible niche publishers like us. And so I realized that, I need to get into, data, but data in a meaningful way, data in a non-evil way, where you don't sign away your data for life and someone else is making tons of money. And so I said, look,
on you so that when you talk into your phone, they're like, oh, all of a sudden he wants this and you get ads for that. I mean, it's the world we live in. Unfortunately, it's just the world we live in. You just kind of have to roll with it.
Retargeting, sure. They have not listening. They're predicting. They just mysteriously know that.
No, listen, my Alexa is the nosiest woman on the planet. She listens to everything I say. So as we wrap this up, because I do love this type of stuff. I'm clearly a pet guy. I mean, I have tattoos of all my dogs on my arm. I mean, I'm like that guy. So I love learning about this stuff, and I think it's something definitely that I would be interested in being an adopter of this product. Mm-hmm. So the best entry point is, mypetgo.com. Everything can be found there for people.
Sure. I mean, look, we'll send you a device for your dog for sure. So just send me the address where you want it to later on. But for anybody else, you can go to www.mypetgo.com and you can buy a monitor there. The site will be rebuilt. It's going to get a little bit better, I think. But look, it works. If you want one, you can buy one. It's inexpensive. There will be, for everybody that buys a Gen 1, you will get a free upgrade to a Gen 2 as long as you commit to more subscription plans. So for those that are thinking, maybe I hold out for the next one, you'll get next one as well. Come in early, help to shape the product because your data is valuable. It helps us to, I would say, your data and your feedback. So a lot of the early adopters are also giving us feedback and kind of saying, look, it would be neat if you could do this, or it would be cool if you could do that. And I think I'm missing this a little bit. You think so? Once we get consensus of this, we can sort of tackle better. What does a Gen 2, what does a Gen 3 look like? How can we improve? Again, you got to start somewhere. So, and there is really no reference point for what we're doing. So we got to be that early, being
an entrepreneur and setting trends, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, there's a lot that go, like you said it a few minutes ago, like an idea starts as A, but by the time you get to F, it's already morphed into multiple different things. And you have to have the flexibility and the ability to kind of roll with it. And the data plays a big part in it. Richard, thank you so much for coming on and educating us about the product. I'm looking forward to seeing how it works. And, listen, we appreciate it. I'd love to have you back on another time as the product evolves to kind of get an update to see what's happening, if you would be cool with that.
Sure. Look, anytime. Thank you for having me. And send me your address and I'll send one over to you, or two, whatever you need.
So folks, if you're listening to this or watching it on our